Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar about Indian budget. Uh, so, you know, First thing, this is a great budget and there are no tax changes. So obviously the interest among investors is like, भाई कुछ भी नहीं हुआ मतलब समझ में नहीं आ रहा कि there's nothing to talk about. But actually there is a lot to talk about. You know what you did not get as fiscal changes. Fiscal मतलब tax related. So tax related कोई भी change नहीं आया. It's all basically no tax changes. एक होता है फिजिकल साइड विच इज टैक्सेशन, दूसरा होता है मॉनेटरी साइड विच इज व्हाट आरबीआई डज टू कंट्रोल इंटरेस्ट रेट्स एंड एफएक्स. उस साइड में हुआ है एंड दैट इफेक्ट of that will be felt irrespective of the tax change. So today, first let's talk about the headlines. क्या क्या पता लगा है, what are the things that have been announced and how does that impact Indian equity, and given that small cap has done well recently, does that continue to support the case for small cap and baskets of small cap in that's available. So that is our focus today. In this next 30 minutes, first what I'll do is I'll touch upon the important points that were announced in the budget, which directly translate to what can happen with small cap stocks. And in the next 30 minutes, we are going to talk about any questions you have, and if you don't have questions, I will basically give you further information on ideas or kind of themes that you have thought might work in the budget, so we can talk about that. So let's keep it interactive of the 30 minutes. First 30 minutes are sort of this me telling you my opinion about the budget per se. So first, the most important thing is 40,000 wagons upgrade hone wale. 40,000 wagons will be upgraded. So that's a straight on capex in the railways. There will be some beneficiaries, but more importantly, right from finished metals processing. So people who make sheet metal, welding banata hai, welding ka rod banata hai. Right from that to people who make upholstery, electrical goods, which will be fitted into these wagons. 40,000 wagons is not a bad number, but it's not a huge number. You can think of, let's say, the material required for each wagon is probably equivalent to 20 cars, right? So you're talking about almost an auto market getting created in terms of the need for such upstream. So you have to think of that from this aspect. Second thing which is important is the 1 lakh crore lending program, which is all going to be interest free or very nominal interest to support innovation and innovative tech and entrepreneurship. The budget already talks about tourism, especially religious tourism, as a way to grow economy, and many of these lending programs will feed into this particular tourism aspect. It's a fact that currently many of the states where tourism around religious monuments are existing, they are going to benefit, and many of them are actually ruled by the current incumbent government. So in a way, that has continued policy certainty around state legislatures and ability to do capex, as well as shows the confidence with which the current government has proposed the rule. So generally क्या होता है, election year है, लोगों को खुश करना है, let's give them some tax sops, let's give them some freebies. None of that has happened, and the markets sort of did not had a knee-jerk reaction where it fell a bit and then it recovered, of course. But the point is that what you have to understand from a institutional investor or bahar ke log jo invest karte hain, FPIs, they are looking at this and saying that this government is so confident that they don't really care to please some taxpayers. They are just following their fiscal discipline that they have charted, and they're doing better than what they had guided. मतलब India में government doing better than the guidance is something which is remarkable. And for example, the number that they are going to target for fiscal deficit is 5.8%. There are two numbers here. एक होता है tax buoyancy. Tax buoyancy is like basically the percentage calculation in terms of what is the tax and the outlay. So how much of the tax, how much buoyancy you have from the tax collection that you can continue to do capex. That has been pegged, that has been about 1.6, 1.7 for the last few years. ये number important नहीं है, but sense is that currently they have estimated it to be 1.13. So they're definitely going to do better. On the fiscal discipline, they have said fiscal deficit of 5.8%. Again, the number is not very important for the apart from technical discussion, but they're going to come under. What that does mean is that the bond yields, जो government के borrowing के bond yields है, they will need to borrow less, they have to pay less interest, and their interest rates and on an average are supposed to come down. This is an important aspect and a very important aspect for small cap stocks. Why? Because a stock is valued in two parts. One is the pro forma cash flow, which is called the ongoing concern for the next 5 years, and the terminal value. This terminal value accounts for the business that you're valuing existing for perpetuity. Perpetuity मतलब forever there. अब अगर ऐसा valuation divide होता है, so 30% is this next 5 years and 70% is forever. As your interest rates go down, this supports higher PE multiples, right? So a lower interest rate basically means that higher PE stocks are still reasonably valued. And more so for smaller companies which are listed, they, for them, a little help in the cost of capital has a disproportionate impact, because like small earners, smaller companies have a hunger to spend because they want to grow, right? Just say somebody who has a lot of money, they are not marginal consumers. Somebody who is at the bottom of the pyramid, they are marginal consumers. Similarly, when the cost of capital goes down, marginal companies, chote companies, they are the ones who are really trying to become big, and therefore the moment they get a little bit of breathing room, they will do the next thing, which is to invest. So therefore it is an important aspect. We looked at few announcements which are related to agri, fisheries, oil seeds. They are oil seeds processing companies that are listed, which make sunflower oil. For example, they were beneficiaries of the Ukraine conflict, where, for example, this particular stock that I'm talking about went up by 100% since the Ukraine war started. And this particular stock can continue to perform well because they are focused on, sunflower oil, which is one of the sunflower seeds, is one of the things that the finance minister spoke about in the budget. It's of course, there in one of her small cases. But the point is that, we are really looking at a government that is exuding, मतलब दिख रहा है कि confident है. They're not too much worried about pleasing their immediate vote base by giving tax stops, and they are able to attract larger and larger capital from external investors while growing tax revenue. Like, is such a kya ho sakta hai? So they are in a very strong wicket, and what you will see as time passes by is that these guys, they are going to outperform their expected tax revenue, right? So how does a government really make money? Their main sources of income are taxes, like how they tax. Taxes mein do hai. Direct income tax, which is income tax that we pay, which is called direct taxes, and income tax that the companies pay, and indirect taxes, GST collections, cess वगैरह, जहाँ पे GST नहीं लगता है, जैसे पेट्रोल डीजल या फिर लिकर, अभी इसमें GST नहीं आया तो उसमें state taxes somewhat लगते हैं. So these kind of things, right? So this is one of the sources of income taxes. Second is borrowing, right? So the government can always borrow to increase their revenue. Third is selling their assets, which is called divestment. Deepam, जो एक department है government की, they are responsible for identifying assets that the government wants to sell. Classic case in the recent example was Air India. Private, now it's in private hands. It was previously owned by the government. There was intention of selling BPCL, which never materialized. But what has also happened is that many of these PSUs are actually doing much, much better in terms of their health of the financial balance sheet versus how they were in the past. So the reason to sell these government-owned companies was that we are government, we are good in governance, we are good in setting policies, we are not good in managing companies. हम लोग का वो skill है नहीं. Some ISIS of IPS officer who is probably managing these companies, they do not come from that technical background. That was the thought process, but that's not true. The bureaucrats are one of the smartest people that India produces, and they can do pretty much anything if they put their mind to it. So what you're seeing is that when there is intent, the same companies that were supposed to be sick companies, they are doing wonderfully well, and the government is now thinking, well, do I really want to sell these assets, or do I want to keep them with me so that whenever I want, which is the final source of income, I can get dividends from these companies, or I can get dividends from the central bank like RBI. So they have so many sources of income. At the point of using a budget is to understand how you're going to generate income in terms of revenue, and how you're going to spend it. The capex outlays that they have put, which is around 3.5% of GDP, the defense, which is 13% of GDP. So these are the ways that the budget, when they put it together, they figure out how they're going to sell different portions of the different portions of the capex cycle. Looking at how this has been positioned, right, and what has been promised pretty much by the most of the policy speech, we can make some fair estimates. So one of the key things that uh, as the budget speech started, they're not talking about next year, they're not talking about next 5 years, they're talking about next 50 years. They're talking about how do we make India a developed country in the next, by 2070, which is still 50 years away almost. They're talking about gift city being a doorway to global trade 300 years from now, right? So they are taking a view that ये साल तो हम बात ही नहीं कर रहे, हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं कि 50 साल, 100 साल, 200 साल में इंडिया कैसे दिखेगा. Of course, they have to execute on it, and they might not be the people who are executing on it. But the point is, like, they are feeling so confident that they're not projecting, like, what am I going to win election next year? How will I run the election process? They are assuming that, they have the mandate to make these visionary statements which last well beyond their lifetime. So if that is true, that means that India is set up on a roadmap, and which is something which the budget promised, that they will come up with a roadmap how exactly, where we are as India, we are going to become a developed country. What does that mean for Indians? And when that roadmap comes, immediately you can figure out and point out who are going to be the beneficiary companies in this trajectory, and you can take positions. In terms of post agri processing, right, one thing which stood out is that they are not talking about giving more incentives or more subsidies to fertilizer to help farmers. They're saying आपने प्रोड्यूस कर दिया, आपको दाम नहीं मिल रहा है, we will take care of it in post agri processing, which means that they want to store that produce better, right, where the farmer is able to get a good price when the price is right. दोनों साइड से अच्छा है, फार्मर के लिए भी अच्छा है because they get the price when they want, which is when the price is better. From a government's point of view, they can keep food inflation under control because they have free reserves of food. कोई भी चीज shortage आती है तो उसको रिलीज कर सकते हैं cold storage से. So they have better control, right? Both ways beneficially, but now they want public and private partnerships to make these cold chains. They have been trying for last 2 3 years. Nothing exceptional has happened yet, but the point is that they are keeping on and keeping at it in that direction. Eventually, it will happen. It takes time to change the existing, as you say, bani banai vyavastha, if you have seen 12th fail. So it has to change, and it takes time. It's not easy, but if the intent is there, and if there's enough number of people trying to change that particular aspect, it is possible. In the budget we have talked about uh, renters becoming house owners. This happened in America too, right? If you go back well enough in the history, America may, it was the same playbook. It was the same playbook where these golden years of America, where there was huge economic expansion, huge. One of the dreams that the government put in the minds of people is, आपका घर आपका होना चाहिए, आप रेंट क्यों कर रहे हैं, आप you own your houses. You would be surprised to know the lowest average age of owning a house is not in India, it's in Spain. So there is a culture where it is rewarded socially, economic, maybe not so much always economical, but socially, emotionally, if you own a house. So the government is saying, like, if you own your house, it's a better deal. So you have, if you can make more and more people own their houses, and that frees up properties for redevelopment, right? Basically, if the choice is make, probably not so good place which I'm renting, which is in a good location, versus owning a house which will take me a little far away, but it's my house, and it's well constructed, it's good sanitation, there is a case to be made for that. And so these other properties will become available for redevelopment. So what I'm saying is, with falling interest rates, as I explained, with lower fiscal deposit deficits, with dream of owning a house, and the fact that there's more tax buoyancy, there's more formalization of economy, real estate as a sector is going to remain, unless something, some fraud comes up, which has happened before. It has a structural advantage, right? You can pick, like, मैं कभी प्लाईवुड कंपनी अच्छी परफॉर्म कर ली, कभी कोई बिल्डर अच्छा परफॉर्म कर लिया, कभी कोई ये पाइप वाला कंपनी कर लिया, कभी कोई पेंट वाला कंपनी कर लिया. But that is all tactical and maybe individual management and idiosyncratic, but as a basket, right? If you must have some exposure to real estate. Also, given the fact that on the fiscal side, other countries are not as prudent as India, you must have some exposure towards gold, as precious metals. These kind of themes will keep emerging. And of course, depending on your risk profile, these allocations can be different, but the point is, you have a much wider canvas now to play with, and therefore it's a much more bullish situation where you're looking at an ability for these smaller companies to do very niche yet dominating presence in certain aspects of the market. Just think about the fact that from 1962 there are 1 lakh, sorry, 1 crore, I beg your pardon, 1 करोड़ लोग हैं जिसके पास 25,000 से कम तक का टैक्स लिटिगेशन केस अभी भी चल रहा है. सो ये जो ये 1 करोड़ केसेस है, 1 करोड़ केसेस को हैंडल करने के लिए इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट में जितना स्ट्रेंथ चाहिए, जितना वर्कलोड चाहिए, राइट, जितने तारीख पे तारीख चाहिए इन द लीगल प्रोसीडिंग्स, वो सब खत्म होने वाले हैं. तो अभी टाइम जो बचेगा वो कहाँ जाएगा? टाइम जो बचेगा वो जाएगा सीरियस इश्यूज पे, राइट? सो सीरियस इश्यू पे जैसे ही टाइम जाएगा, it will lead to even more formalization, even more compliance. So the point is that overall, everything has been constructed around formalization of economy. GST collection, second all-time highest. Tax collection, more than estimated. Inflation under check. Rupee, stable. Interest rates, stable. ये macro environment में banana is very difficult, and in this kind of condition, they have made a very conservative budget. They could have gone all out and said, like, भाई आपको मैंने ये these freebies मिलने वाले हैं, because they could have said कि ये freebies मिलेंगे तो शायद लोग हम लोग को वोट भी दे दे. ऐसा उसने नहीं किया, because this is a sign of confidence. This external investors will look at and say कि ठीक है, if they are so confident, I don't need to worry about policy certainty. मैं अभी से ही पैसा लगाना स्टार्ट कर देता हूँ. So that will give further path towards consolidation in the market, where some of the better companies might outperform, because now the foreign investors might not view the risk of policy uncertainty as much as they were viewing that before. So this is something which we have to look at. But overall, in my opinion, it's a very good budget. There have been more details and more strategic announcements, which is not so much that a retail investor usually thinks about. This is more something which an economist or a sort of a investment strategist would absorb and make an opinion. But same cheese, we can kind of guide at a retail level how to interpret, like, आपके लिए इसमें क्या है, आप क्यों इस बजट को सुनेंगे, ये बजट सुन के आप क्यों रिएक्ट करेंगे, किस में कैसे रिएक्ट करना चाहिए, ये चीज मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूँ एज अ पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, कि यू कैन देन मेक योर ओन डिसीजंस. ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं आपको बता दूं कि ये रेलवे स्टॉक अच्छा है, ये रेलवे स्टॉक बुरा है, ये बिल्डर का स्टॉक ले लीजिए, ये तो कोई भी कर सकता है. द पॉइंट इज, कैन आई गिव यू एनफ reasons as a framework for you to identify what you think is the right place to be in and how to make money. One thing you have to remember is that tax collection will keep on getting more and more penetrative, which means that there'll be more and more businesses and people who will come in the ambit of tax collection. It is never going to be that because 95% Indians are not paying taxes, let's get rid of taxes from the 5% people also. कभी नहीं होने वाला है. It will be more that let's lift all these 95% people out of the poverty, bring them into the taxable bracket, and make them part of the formal economy. That's what's more likely to happen. So in that case, of course, the people who pay the most taxes, one thing that the finance minister touched upon is service to tax providers. There is a sentiment that, my tax de raha hu, what am I getting out of it? What you're getting out of it is a demographic that is becoming richer. And if you're, the only way typically for you to recover wealth from this erosion from taxes is to invest in companies that are actually going to sell to the people who are going to be the first consumers of services or goods, right from financial services to basic goods like a two-wheeler, to a house, the first house or the first vacation or the first, family planning, where they go and pick a school for the children. Which school, where, which location do they stay? All this is going to happen as and when things become more formal. And if you're in the higher tax bracket, the best thing and the best way out for you is to understand how these consumers are getting created, who is going to be in front of these consumers by creating goods and services that are attractive to them, and are they running those operations profitably, and invest in those companies, right? So that is the way you must think about how you recover your taxes, instead of expecting that the government will reduce taxes for the people who are earning a lot of money, because that's the only way they can kind of equalize society a bit, right? Where they are able to sell the story by इसके पास बहुत पैसा है, इससे थोड़ा पैसा लेके आप हम लोग let's tax them. And then the second part is obviously there is a need for that. There's a need for the fact that government must have different mechanisms to collect taxes. Finally, this is a budget which is a vote of account. There'll be one more budget once the next government is elected. When that happens, right, my opinion about the next budget, if it were to be from the same government that is currently in power, it is going to be even more conservative than what it is today. Because then, if they don't need to please somebody before the election, forget about pleasing anybody post election, right? So they're going to go all hog in making sure that they are building the pathway for the dream of making India a developed country, which is only going to happen with greater and greater, collections by the government, by being able to generate more revenue, borrow more at a lower cost, uh, create customs duties for imports to come in so that they can protect domestic companies, create indigenized technology, right from food supply to good supply. All of this is going to become even more important, and we'll see more and more of these aspects being tabled in the budget, instead of like, let's go back and give the second home free, no cap on interest deductions on the second home. So that kind of expectation, I think, will not happen. What could happen, for example, is they might go even further. They might start saying that, okay, let's start taxing inheritance, which is not the case in India. It happens in other countries outside India. मतलब आपके पेरेंट्स से आपको पैसा मिल रहा है, उस पर आपको कोई टैक्स नहीं लगता अभी, इट्स अ गिफ्ट. बट अगर गवर्नमेंट को लगेगा कि दैट इज अ लार्ज पूल ऑफ वेल्थ जो ट्रांसफर होने वाला है फ्रॉम वन जनरेशन टू अनदर, उसमें मेरे को टैक्स मिलना चाहिए, तो दे कैन ऐड टू दैट. सो दोज काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स ऑब्वियसली will be negative sentiment wise, भाई मतलब 70 साल में नहीं हुआ, क्यों हो रहा है अभी. But the point is, like, the number of people who will get really affected by that is so small, that doesn't matter electorally, right? So you have to think about that. And if that were to happen to you, only way you can protect yourself is, again, by understanding where this tax money is going and who is going to be benefited by this tax money. If they are going to be benefited, are you investing in those ways such that the profit that they earn from that benefit comes back to you, right? So that's the only way to kind of recover some of this tax related concerns, even that nothing was changed tax wise. That said, I think, we have काफी बातों पे हमने touch किया है. We have talked about a few aspects. So I would love to know if you have any questions or any specific points that you want me to elaborate. That would be something which I would like to do for you. So if you would like to share the questions. So the first question, which is a great question, which says, like, what measures has the government taken to boost investment and promote job creation in the budget, especially key sectors like manufacturing and infrastructure? There was hardly any mention of job creation, right? Why did this happen? It happened because this is a vote of account. It's not a policy direction budget. I'm very sure in the next budget there will be a lot more discussion on exactly how these jobs have to be created. एक बात उन लोगों ने बोली है, हम लोग एक विल डू टू थिंग्स. एक व्हाइट पेपर निकालेंगे, व्हाइट पेपर में हम लोग बताएंगे कि 10 साल पहले क्या होता था, हम लोग अभी क्या करें, कितना अच्छा कर रहे हैं. सेकेंड चीज हम लोग जो करेंगे कि एक रोड मैप बनाएंगे कि अभी से लेके तभी तक जब हम लोग डेवलप कंट्री हो जाएंगे, हाउ इज द पाथ गोना लुक लाइक, क्या क्या करने वाले हैं हम लोग. तो वहां पे ये जॉब क्रिएशन वाले चीजें ना, इन द नेक्स्ट बजट, based on that roadmap that they're going to outline, I'm very sure that those points will be addressed there. But good question nevertheless. The second question is, what initiatives are outlined in the budget to enhance agricultural sector's resilience, improve farmers income, and ensure food security. The last point na, food security, they are talking about post agri processing. Food security का मतलब क्या है, क्योंकि मतलब there are two parts. एक तो है we are giving free ration to people. Nobody is really kind of denied food anymore. When I was a child, people used to talk about food scarcity. Abhi, if you go even semi-rural areas, I don't know exactly the very rural smaller villages में exactly क्या हो रहा है, but let's say tier 5 to tier 6 kind of place जहाँ पे 10,000 लोगों की बस्ती है. In those areas, food is not a concern anymore. खाना तो मिल जाएगा. Now the thing is like, how do I uplift myself from poverty? How do I educate myself? How do I educate my children? मैंने तो ये जिंदगी जी ली, मेरे बच्चों के लिए क्या है, मैंने ऐसे घर पे जी लिया. Can I get a better house? Can I get better sanitation? What can I do to change my destiny? That is the thought process, right? I am fed up. I am fed well, so now I can think. So ये चीज हुई है. Second thing, एक question आया कि railway stocks have given a lot of run up. What do you think will continue or might face? See, this is a general, it's not just my view, right? It's a general concern among a lot of fund managers who are saying कि they have gone far too fast. But ये सब opinion है. There will be some people who will say that ये सब ज़्यादा हो गया है, correction आने वाला है. They will not invest and they will justify later कि ये तो नहीं होने वाला था हम लोग. And then finally, if they are wrong, they'll say हाँ मिस हो गया, sorry. पैसा आपका लग रहा है. So, but if you ask my personal opinion, I think obviously railways corridors बनने वाले, 3 corridor, right? They were talking about freight corridor, they are talking about port corridor, and there was another third corridor, I can't remember on the top of that. 3 corridor बनने वाले. What is the meaning of these corridors? These corridors means that there'll be unrestricted movement of railway carriages to reduce the time of delivery between between these kind of essentially these sectors. So what can we do to make it faster? And this is something which has to be taken into account. Which of your small case stand to benefit from capital allocation declared in the budget? I think we are like Lotusdew is a small and micro cap specialist. We focus only on small caps. हम लोग से large cap नहीं समझ में आता है. What value add we can bring to an index fund. So this is like a gift to any small cap investor, right? As in general, because they have taken into account that cost of capital will be low. They have taken into account that tax buoyancy is high, which means smaller companies that are listed, they are part of the formal economy, so definitely benefits them, like more formalization. Like next is that what can we do to make better selections of stocks. So we are very bullish on the small cap sector even at these levels going forward. We think there's a lot of structural structurally they are still poised, but nobody knows. किसी को actually में नहीं पता है. We are telling this based on the information that we know. There's a gentleman, Suraj Kaleji. He's been asking the same question. Hi Abhishek, I've subscribed to all your 3 small cases. High frequency is not performing good. High turnover, high taxes, high brokerage. Please think less of churn and quarterly balance. See, the high frequency, as the name suggests, it is a high churn portfolio. If you're paying too high a brokerage, find another broker who can, these are all delivery stocks. There are enough brokerages that give you 0 delivery charges for, equity delivery. So maybe you're with the You need to think about which broker you want to use for this strategy. Second, high taxes, I don't agree, because the difference between short-term and capital gains tax and long-term capital gains tax right now is 5%. So short term में 15 लगता है, long term में 10 लगता है. So you're really talking about a 5% difference on alpha, right? And so if you're if you're able to generate good performance, it doesn't matter. High turnover is high maintenance, but the fact that obviously in terms of performance, we try our best. There is no guarantee that we will be able to perform well always. There are definitely cases, and it's possible that for some time we might not have good performance. Personally, I think what we are offering or what we are doing in terms of that particular strategy, it's a well constructed, thought out strategy. There could be definitely periods where some customers might find that the performance is not good enough. That's because it has less risk, right? In the high frequency strategy, it's much more larger, liquid companies, even among the small cap space. Other strategies go further down in the market cap, which are more risky, less liquid, higher risk. So, where do you stand in the risk return bucket? What kind of risk you're able to tolerate based on your risk profile? You would have recommended a certain allocation. So yes, but point taken. Um, how does the budget environment environmental concerns and promote sustainable development, especially in terms of green initiatives? See, one thing, the world should learn how green is to be done from India, right? As an Indian culture, we have always worshipped nature, right? Which other culture worships nature? I don't know, right? So if that is the case, they should learn from India how we respect nature and natural resources. Therefore, I think it is very part of our DNA in the society, irrespective of where you come from, which region, which portion of India, what is your language. Everybody is quite emotionally attached to natural resources and how we consume them. So I think the fact that we are the forerunners of biofuel, right? We are talking about oil seeds, not only for food consumptions, but biomass that can be used for ethanol, for example, sugarcane output. We were one of the first. We could become an exporter of biofuel. So that's the kind of future that's possible with the vision of becoming self energy reliant. Next question: which other sectors other than infra, railway, defense, clean energy, till elections? I think sectors, you are missing real estate here, right? I think I'm pretty sure that that's a sector that's also likely to benefit. So maybe look at real estate as a sector, if it's attractive or not. Views on Amritkal, I mean, as Shakespeare famously said, what's in a name, it would be as sweet as it if it were called by a different name. Like he was talking about a rose. Yes, it's one name or the other, but the point is, it's India, right? It's Bharat, where the population wants it now. No government can ignore the want of people, that they want to have a better quality of life. They want better roads, they want cleaner water, they want a cleaner environment. Nobody can deny that. It doesn't matter now anymore which government comes, ये तो सारे demands रहेंगे ही रहेंगे. So if this government is calling it Amrit Kal, let them call it that and deliver that. That's more important. um New world order, it's post COVID. See, the point is, what is this new world order they're talking about? uh, they are talking about the fact that in these few years, it's not much to do about COVID. In these few years, people have ramped up technology. Just to give you an example, uh, US tried to stop exports of lithography, which is the technology used to etch semiconductors. The best in the world is done by a company called ASML, which is based in Netherlands. They are able to do lithography at 2 nanometer, right? When US stopped exports of lithography technology to China, they were somewhere in the 16 nanometers. Without US's help, they have now around 7 nanometers. In another 2 3 years, they will be as good as, if not better than, the best in the world. We are nowhere in that scene, right? So the point is that we can do something else. We can be an exporter of green hydrogen to catch up. We can exporter of biofuels. Uh, we are just starting on the semiconductor journey, but Indians are super good thinkers. They can definitely do stuff. But I've known many Chinese nationals. They are equally good thinkers. So the competition is stiff. new world order will emerge. We will be the third largest economy eventually. All that will happen. But the point is, what is going to be the controlling factor, right? Which is going to determine the world order. Uh, there's one more question talking of IRFC specifically. What do you feel on it? I mean, stock specific again. Um, First of all, it's very hard to give an opinion in a webinar, and you know who cares, like what's the research backing it. But more importantly, like, we are not allowed to. So talking about the railway sector, generally it's a obviously there's focus, and if you pick good stocks there, you're likely to do well, right? So there's no two ways about it. There's no no lot of thinking required around it. But I think great question so far, I think. But we are running towards the end of all questions. So I would, unless there are any further questions that I can see, let me check. Yeah, I think that covers most of the questions. But if you have any further questions, just email to investor.relations@lotusdew.in. We will be happy to take more questions offline. But thank you very much for spending time with me, and you know hearing my thoughts. Again, as I said, it's not an inconsequential budget, but it's more the fact that I'm just trying to scroll. Okay, there's a new question. I'll take this. We have a bit of time, so if you have more questions coming, I can stay on. Jewelry market is getting organized in India. And what is your say on this? Will to the gold jewelry sector boom? So there are two parts to it, right? What you're saying is correct. It is becoming more organized, but less demand of gold jewelry, right? The more um, gold as a saving instrument or gold as a store of value continues to be the case, but gold as a jewelry want, uh, it is not as obvious to many people as it was in the past, right? So which means that if you're a jewelry manufacturer, like call it, this organized listed jewelry manufacturers, there are many. What you're really facing is, you have choice to either be modern lightweight jewelry, which is one part, and or you stick to the wedding and high heavy jewelry. And then how do you create multiple brands which appeal to different kinds of consumers? So as this goes on, the main point is that organized players will do better than unorganized players. But again, all that I've said so far, please do consult a professional investment advisor. These are all conjectures and opinions based on the limited amount of time I've had to analyze the budget. But given the experience that I've had in markets for many years, it is easier for me to maybe make these opinions. But yeah, these are all, you have to take that into account, whether you have the correct risk appetite to act upon any of the things that I've said. So please do your risk profiling with a proper investment advisory process. It protects you, it helps you in bad times. Good times, everybody is going to do well. Bad times is when you need all this. So make sure you're prepared for the bad times too. uh, so uh, thanks again, and see you soon in another webinar. Bye, have a nice evening.